Sunday evening, 1976. You are sat on the settee. The telly is on. There is a tease made on the bedside table upstairs, a SodaStream on the kitchen counter, and a Raleigh Chopper leaning against the garage wall. Every one of those was a British invention. Every one of them was ahead of its time, and every one of them was quietly killed off, sold abroad, or mocked into oblivion. I have got 25 of them in this video. Some you will know the second I say the name. Others you have completely forgotten until right now. And the first one is going to make you angry because Britain invented the internet 20 years before the internet and nobody noticed. Now, before we dive in, tap that subscribe button. You will not want to miss what is coming next. Between 1970 and 1985, Britain produced more world-first consumer innovations per head than any country in Europe. Pocket calculators, home computers, supersonic passenger flight, teletext, home carbonation, personal electric vehicles. Most were invented here. Almost none survived here. What replaced them was not always better. Sometimes it was just cheaper, or American, or backed by a boardroom that did not understand what it had. The first one catches most people off guard. Prestel. The post office launched it in 1979. Blocky colored text on your television screen, delivered through the telephone line. 100,000 pages of information, news, weather, train timetables, share prices and shopping. It cost around £200 for a Prestel adapted television set, plus phone charges. Tomorrow's World raved about it. It was commemorated on a stamp. By 1982, they had added electronic mail. By 1983, there was online banking through the Bank of Scotland and the Nottingham Building Society. By 1984, online shopping trials were running. This was the World Wide Web, 15 years early, built by a post office engineer called Sam Fedida. By the end of 1980, it had just 6,000 users. The post office had expected 1 million. France built almost the same thing and called it Minitel. They gave away free terminals and ran it until 2012. Britain charged too much and backed away. The concept was sound. It was not a failure of technology. It was a failure of nerve. That was not the only time Britain built the future and left it on the shelf. Ceefax. The BBC launched it in 1974. Press the text button on the remote. Pages of blocky colored text cycled through. News, sport, weather, TV listings, recipes. Page 3:02 for the football scores. The pages loaded slowly. You sat there watching the counter tick up. 297, 298, 299. Then your page appeared. Free. No phone line. Just your aerial. Entire Saturday afternoons were spent watching the vidiprinter roll in the results. Families checked the weather on Ceefax before every holiday. For millions of people, this was the first time information came to you, rather than you going to the library for it. It was switched off on the 23rd of October, 2012. No replacement, just the internet, which most of the people who loved Ceefax did not want. The Sinclair Executive. 1972, the world's first slimline pocket calculator, designed by Clive Sinclair. £79.95, which is roughly £1,100 today. Thin enough to fit in a shirt pocket. Black casing, red LED display, powered by tiny hearing aid batteries. Before this, calculators were the size of typewriters. Engineers, accountants, and teachers queued to buy one. It was a status object, carried in breast pockets at meetings. Within 3 years, Japanese manufacturers undercut the price to under £10. Britain invented the pocket calculator. Britain does not make pocket calculators. Then came the Sinclair Black Watch in 1975, Britain's first affordable digital LED watch. It cost £24.95 or £17.95 if you built the kit yourself. Black plastic casing, red LED digits that only lit up when you pressed a button to save the battery. Thousands ordered it by mail. Men wore them to work, convinced they were living in a science fiction film. The watch was a disaster. Condensation got inside the casing. The buttons stuck. The LED drained the battery in days. Returns flooded Sinclair radionics. The company nearly went under. Sinclair's genius was real. His quality control was not. Not everything Sinclair touched broke. But we will come back to that. The Goblin Teas Maid. A bedside unit with an alarm clock attached to a small kettle and teapot. Set the timer the night before. At 6:30 in the morning, the kettle boiled, the water poured itself into the pot, and your tea was waiting before you had opened your eyes. The gurgling sound of it working became the sound of every morning in Britain. It was a wedding list staple through the 1960s and 70s. Every bedroom in every bed and breakfast had one. It was the most British invention ever produced, a machine whose sole purpose was to make sure you never faced consciousness without tea. By the 1980s, it became a punchline. Comedians mocked it, and design magazines sneered. Sales collapsed. The brand was passed from Goblin to BSR to Swan to Moulinex to Littlewoods. The machine that made tea before you woke up was too simple to survive a world that wanted complexity. The Space Hopper. A large orange rubber ball with a smiling face and two rubber horns to grip, inflated with a foot pump. You sat on it and bounced. That was it. About £1.50 in the early 1970s. Every child had one or wanted one. Races down pavements, bouncing competitions in back gardens. Adults tried them at parties after a few drinks and ended up on the lawn. Nothing that came after it was as simple or as stupid or as perfect. SodaStream was invented in 1903 by Guy Gilby of the gin family. It reached peak popularity in Britain in the late 1970s. It was a plastic machine on the kitchen counter with a carbon dioxide canister underneath and a reusable bottle. You pressed the button, the gas hissed in, and the water fizzed. Then you added a concentrated syrup, cola, lemonade, cherryade, cream soda. Branded syrups included Tizer, Fanta, and Ewan Brew. The jingle arrived in 1979. Get busy with the fizzy. Every kitchen had one, or knew someone who did. Children fought over who pressed the button. The drinks never tasted quite right. Everyone knew it, but nobody said it. Making your own fizzy pop in the kitchen felt like the future. The company was sold to an Israeli firm in 1998. In 2018, PepsiCo bought it for $3.2 billion. A British invention ended up owned by America's second largest drinks company, and the kitchen counter is empty now. 3 of the first 7 items on this list were invented in Britain, peaked in the 70s, and are now owned by foreign corporations. The Sinclair brand belongs to nobody. SodaStream belongs to PepsiCo. The Teas Made trademark sits with a holding company. The products did not fail. The country that made them moved on before the rest of the world caught up. Raleigh Chopper, designed by Alan Oakley at the Raleigh factory in Nottingham. High-rise handlebars, a long banana seat with a backrest, a car-style gear stick on the crossbar, a fat rear tyre and a skinny front. It came in infrared, hot orange and ultraviolet. The Mark II in 1972 cost around £32. That was serious money for a bicycle. It was the bike you wanted for Christmas, the bike you did wheelies on. The gear stick between your legs was a design flaw nobody mentioned until decades later. It made Raleigh the biggest bicycle manufacturer in the world. Discontinued in 1982. The American BMX craze took over. A nostalgia reissue appeared in 2004. Lighter, safer, and entirely missing the point. The Breville Snack and Sandwich Toaster. Hinged hot plates that sealed 2 sandwiches into triangles with crimped edges. You buttered the outsides of the bread, put the filling in, and closed it. Cheese and ham. Cheese and onion. Baked beans if you were feeling brave. Leftover curry if you had lost all sense. the crimped edge sealed in the molten filling at approximately the temperature of the sun. Every household had one between 1974 and 1982. The first bite always burned the roof of your mouth. Nobody learned. Vesta curry, Vesta chow mein, dried packet meals by bachelors. A cardboard box with 2 foil sachets inside, one of dried rice or noodles and one of flavoured powder or sauce. The chow mein came with a separate sachet of crispy noodles, around 25 pence in the early 70s. For most British families, this was their first curry, their first chow mein. Exotic food from a cardboard box that tasted like nothing from the countries it claimed to represent. Nobody cared, because in 1974, a chicken chow mein from a packet was an adventure. The stylophone, a miniature electronic organ played with a metal stylus, invented by Brian Jarvis in 1968, a small metal keyboard in a plastic casing. You touched the stylus to the metal plates, and it made a thin, buzzing, unmistakable electronic sound. About £2.50. David Bowie used one on Space Oddity. Children played it on car journeys and drove their parents to the edge of reason. 3 million were sold worldwide by the mid-70s. Production stopped in 1975. For a few years, a £2.50 toy gave ordinary children electronic music before most adults had heard the word synthesizer. If the trim phone was ahead of its time, the next one was ahead of everyone's time. The trim phone, the General Post Office designer telephone, was slim and elegant, made of 2-tone plastic in grey, green or blue. The handset warbled instead of ringing, a distinctive electronic trill that sounded like nothing else in the house. You rented it from the post office for a premium. If someone had a trim phone in the hallway, you noticed. In a decade of orange and brown, it was the one thing in the house that looked like the future. British Telecom replaced the General Post Office. Telephone deregulation meant you could buy your own telephone, and the trim phone became just another phone. The idea that a telephone could be a design object was 30 years early. Apple eventually proved it right. British Rail's advanced passenger train was a tilting train that leaned into curves, allowing higher speeds on existing track. Development began at British Rail's Research Centre in Derby. The experimental version ran in 1971. The prototype entered trial service in December 1981, running from London to Glasgow. The concept was revolutionary. Italian Pendolino trains, now running on the same West Coast main line, used tilting technology that British Rail pioneered. The press destroyed it. Early trials had problems with the tilt mechanism. Some passengers felt nauseous. The tabloids called it the queasy rider. British Rail pulled it after 3 days. Britain invented the tilting train. Italy built it. Italy now sells it back to us. Findus crispy pancakes. Breaded parcels filled with minced beef, chicken and mushroom, cheese or ham and cheese. They came in a bright orange box and were cooked from frozen in about 20 minutes. They cost around 45 pence for a box of 4. This was Tuesday night dinner for half the families in Britain, served with oven chips and frozen peas. Nobody pretended they were fine dining. They were hot, they were quick, and children ate them without complaint. Green Shield stamps. Small green stamps given with every purchase at petrol stations and supermarkets. You stuck them into books, page after page. When you had filled enough, you took them to a Green Shield catalogue shop and swapped them for goods. Toasters, crockery, garden furniture. Your mother kept the books in the kitchen drawer. Filling one felt like an achievement. At its peak, 130,000 shops gave them out. Tesco dropped them in 1977 and cut prices instead. The catalogue shops were converted. The company became Argos. Green Shield stamps. Invented the loyalty economy. Then the loyalty economy decided it did not need stamps anymore. Green Shield stamps became Argos. Belgium became Iceland. SodaStream became PepsiCo. The pattern is always the same. A British company builds something people love. A bigger company buys it, renames it, or replaces it. The original disappears. The people who remember it are told they are being sentimental, but sentiment is just memory with a spine. Bajam, Britain's frozen food supermarket, founded in 1968 by John Apthorpe. 250 stores at its peak. Nothing but frozen food and white goods. Cold air hit you the second you walked through the door. The weekly Bajam trip with Mum, loading carrier bags into the boot, half the garage given over to the chest freezer. In 1989, Iceland, a smaller rival, launched a hostile takeover. Bajam, 3 times bigger, was swallowed whole. Every store rebranded. The name vanished overnight. The Hostess Trolley, a heated serving trolley on wheels with glass lids over heated compartments. You prepared the food, placed the dishes on the trolley, plugged it in and wheeled it into the dining room. Prawn cocktail, coq au vin, Black Forest Gatto, all kept warm under glass. It cost around £30 to £50 in the mid-70s. It was the centerpiece of the dinner party, alongside fondue sets and bottles of Matthias Rose. By the 80s, it had become a boot sale staple. The concept was perfectly sensible. Fashion simply moved on and left it behind. The Triumph TR7 was launched in 1975. It was British Leyland's wedge-shaped sports car. With pop-up headlamps and tartan interior trim, it was made in Speke, Liverpool. The advertising called it the shape of things to come. People queued to see it at motor shows. It looked like nothing else on the road. Strike action at Speke disrupted production. Build quality was dreadful. Doors did not close, electrics failed, and water got in. British Leyland killed the Triumph name in 1984. The shape of things to come turned out to be the shape of things that leaked. The Princess, British Leyland's wedge-shaped family saloon, 1975. Hydrogus suspension gave it a ride quality better than almost anything in its class. Spacious interior. Top Gear later called it the best car British Leyland ever produced. But there was no hatchback. The boot was too small. Build quality was inconsistent. The British Leyland badge frightened buyers. The car was better than the company that made it. British Leyland killed 2 good cars with the same problem. The cars were not the problem. Subbuteo, table football, tiny plastic players on weighted bases, flicked across a green baize pitch on the dining table. Accessory sets included floodlights, grandstands, crowd figures, and police on horseback. Team strips matched real clubs. A basic set cost around £3.50 in the mid-70s. Saturday afternoons on your stomach, replaying the results. The pitch always curled at the edges. The ball always rolled under the settee. One player always lost his head, and you glued it back on with Bostik. Video games arrived. FIFA on the PlayStation replaced flicking plastic men across a cloth pitch. Subbuteo did not fail because it stopped working. It failed because screens replaced imagination. The Sinclair pocket television. Sinclair began working on a miniature portable TV in the mid-70s. The finished product arrived in 1983. It used a flat-screen cathode ray tube, small enough to hold in one hand. A 2-inch screen. It sold for around £80. The idea of watching television in the palm of your hand was considered absurd in 1977. By 2007, every smartphone in the world could do it. Just 15,000 were made. The man who put a calculator in your pocket wanted to put a television there too. He was right about both. He was only paid for one. Wimpy, Britain's original fast food chain. Table service. A burger on a plate with a knife and fork. Bender in a bun. Brown Derby dessert. Coffee in a cup and saucer. Over 500 branches by the early 1980s. For most British children in the 70s, Wimpy was their first restaurant experience, a birthday treat, a reward after the shops. McDonald's arrived in Britain in 1974. By the mid-1980s, the American chain was everywhere. Wimpy tried to compete by switching to counter service, and it lost what made it different. A handful survive today, mostly at motorway services and seaside towns. McDonald's did not invent the burger in Britain. Wimpy did. McDonald's just had more money. The hovercraft, the SRN-4, Christopher Cockerell's invention, scaled up to carry 400 passengers and 60 cars across the English Channel. Dover to Calais in 35 minutes. The noise was tremendous. The spray was constant. You floated. The craft skimmed the water on a cushion of air. It was launched in 1968. Children pressed their faces to the windows. You walked up the ramp into something that looked like a spaceship and sounded like a jet engine. The Channel Tunnel opened in 1994. The hovercraft service was withdrawn in 2000. The tunnel is faster and quieter. It is also a hole in the ground. Nobody ever pressed their face to a tunnel window. Britain built Concorde and the hovercraft in the same decade. Both crossed the Channel. Both were engineering triumphs. Both are gone. The rest of the world now builds electric ferries and supersonic business jets using principles the British worked out 50 years ago. But the craft themselves are in museums now, and the people who remember riding them are running out of years to tell the story. Smash. Cadbury's instant mashed potato. Dried potato flakes in a drum. Add hot water, stir, and you had mashed potato of a kind. The TV advert with the Martians laughing at humans peeling actual potatoes was voted the best British advert of all time. Every kitchen cupboard had a drum of Smash behind the tinned peas. It went with everything: fish fingers, Findus crispy pancakes and sausages. It was the mortar that held the 1970s British dinners together. Still technically available but invisible on shelves. 2 inches of shelf space on the bottom row next to the stock cubes. The Martians would laugh at that too. Concorde. Mark II. Twice the speed of sound. London to New York in 3 hours and 20 minutes. It had a droop nose that lowered for landing, and afterburners that pushed you back in your seat. Its first commercial flight was on the 21st of January, 1976, from London to Bahrain with British Airways. Only 20 were ever built. The sound of Concorde overhead was unmistakable. Children looked up. Adults looked up. For a generation of Britons, Concorde was proof that this country could still build something the world envied. It was the fastest, the most beautiful, and the most ambitious passenger aircraft ever made. It was retired on the 24th of October, 2003. No successor has been built. No country has matched it since. The fastest way to cross the Atlantic in 2026 is slower than it was in 1976. Subscribe to the channel. Watch the next video to keep these stories alive.